They stopped attacking you because they finally understood. Think about this for a moment. The forces that once acted against you, I know you felt it deeply, the systems that coordinated to block your path, the people who armed themselves against your rise, they all fell silent, not because they forgave you, nor because they suddenly developed a conscience, because there has been a fundamental change in the structure of reality. The war is over, and you won. You didn't win because you fought harder. You didn't win because you outsmarted them or played their game better. You won because, while every fiber of your being screamed at you to run, to hide, to retreat back into the comfortable cage they built for you, you didn't budge. While storms raged, you stood there, rooted like an ancient tree, and reality noticed this. This is hyperreality, and you'll understand it better later. If you think you understand, comment below. What you're about to experience doesn't have a name in their textbooks. They don't teach this in business schools or self-help seminars because it exists outside their framework of understanding. This is what happens when a chosen one crosses the threshold from resistance to sovereignty. This is the great shift. And chosen one, you need to understand what's happening right now, because the signs are already appearing in your life. And if you don't recognize them, you'll think you're imagining things. You'll second-guess the miracles unfolding around you. You'll talk yourself out of your own victory. So let me tell you exactly what the great shift looks like when it arrives. The system that once fought you is now serving you. The elites who coordinated against you are on their knees, whether they realize it or not. The obstacles that blocked your path are moving aside. The enemies who plotted your downfall are inadvertently becoming instruments of your elevation. Reality itself has reorganized around your frequency. This isn't metaphorical. This isn't manifestation rhetoric or spiritual bypassing. This is observable, tangible, undeniable evidence that the game has changed and you're no longer playing by their rules. You're making the rules now. And the beautiful part? You don't even have to announce it. The shift is so profound that even your enemies feel it in their bones. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in the physical realm. You walk into a room, maybe it's a business meeting, maybe it's a family gathering, maybe it's just a coffee shop, and the energy shifts the moment you enter. Not because you're trying to dominate the space, not because you're performing confidence or putting on a mask, but because you've crossed into a level of authenticity so complete that reality bends around you. The people who used to talk over you now wait for you to speak. The ones who dismissed your ideas now listen with intensity. The ones who mocked your vision now ask how they can be part of it. And here's the thing that's going to mess with your mind at first: they don't even know why they're doing it. They've been programmed by the simulation to respond to power. And you've stepped into a frequency of power that their subconscious recognizes even if their conscious mind refuses to acknowledge it. They're bowing before they realize they're bowing. They're serving before they understand they're servants. This is what sovereignty looks like in motion. Take Sarah, a software engineer who spent 3 years being systematically undermined by her manager, a classic agent who saw her light and decided it needed to be extinguished. This manager blocked her promotions, reassigned her projects to less competent colleagues, spread subtle rumors about her reliability. Sarah almost quit a dozen times, but something inside her, that divine stubbornness that chosen ones carry, made her stay and hold her ground. She didn't fight back in the traditional sense. She didn't play office politics. She didn't try to defend herself against whisper campaigns. She just kept showing up, kept delivering excellence, kept being undeniably good at what she did. And then the great shift happened. The manager who'd been her primary tormentor got promoted to a regional position. On paper, this looked like the enemy winning. But here's what actually happened. That promotion removed the primary blocker from Sarah's immediate environment. Within 2 months, Sarah was promoted to senior engineer. Within 6 months, she was leading the exact project her old manager had stolen from her 3 years prior. But the shift went deeper than job titles. That same manager, now in a regional role, started inadvertently funneling resources to Sarah's team, not because they suddenly liked her, but because their own survival in the new position required them to back winning projects, and Sarah's work was undeniably superior. The person who spent years trying to destroy her career became the person signing off on her biggest budget increases. The Matrix agent became an unwilling servant. Reality reorganized itself to turn her adversary into her advocate, and nobody could explain why. That's the great shift. Or consider Marcus, an independent filmmaker who spent 5 years getting rejected by every major studio, every streaming platform, every traditional gatekeeper in the entertainment industry. They told him his vision was too dark, too unconventional, too risky. What they really meant was too truthful, too awakened, too threatening to the narratives we control. Marcus could have bent his vision to fit their boxes. He could have diluted his message, played the game, made the compromises, but he held his ground. He kept making his films his way, funding them through alternative means, building an audience one person at a time. Then something shifted. A mid-level executive at one of the streaming platforms, someone who'd personally rejected Marcus's work twice, got fired for unrelated reasons. The replacement executive happened to be going through their own awakening, their own questioning of the industry's formulas. They stumbled across Marcus's work, not through official channels, but through the underground network of people who'd been sharing his films. Within 18 months, Marcus had a 3-picture deal with full creative control. But here's the really beautiful part: that same executive who'd rejected him twice? They ended up at a competing studio that needed content desperately. And in their desperation, they reached out to Marcus, offering him opportunities they would have never considered before. The gatekeeper who'd slammed the door in his face was now begging him to walk through. The system that rejected him was now competing for his attention. This wasn't karma in the punitive sense. This was reality reorganizing itself to align with someone who refused to compromise their frequency. This is what happens when you hold your ground long enough for the great shift to arrive. Let me tell you what's happening behind the scenes, in the invisible architecture of reality that most people never perceive. There's an intelligence operating in this universe that tracks authenticity the way their systems track compliance. When you operate from your true frequency, not the performance, not the mask, but the real you, you emit a signal that this intelligence recognizes. At first, that signal makes you a target. The Matrix and its agents attack anything authentic because authenticity is the one thing they cannot control, cannot replicate, cannot integrate into their system. So they try to break you, to pressure you into conformity, to make you believe that being yourself is the problem. But if you hold that frequency long enough, if you refuse to dim your light no matter how much darkness they throw at you, something remarkable happens. The intelligence I'm talking about, call it God, call it the universe, call it cosmic law, that intelligence begins to actively reorganize reality in your favor. It's not that you're manifesting things through positive thinking. It's that your sustained authenticity has triggered a response from the operating system of reality itself. You've proven that you won't be corrupted, won't be controlled, won't be integrated. And once reality confirms that you're incorruptible, it stops testing you and starts serving you. The attacks cease, the obstacles dissolve, the enemies transform into unwitting allies. Because you've graduated from the level where you needed those challenges, you've passed the initiation. Now you're being given the kingdom you were always meant to rule. This is why it feels so surreal when it happens. You're walking through a world that used to resist you at every turn, and now doors are opening before you arrive. Opportunities are finding you instead of you chasing them. The right people are appearing in your life with perfect timing. Resources are flowing to you from unexpected sources. And the people who used to block you? They're the ones making it happen, often without even realizing it. Let me give you another example of how this manifests in the material world. There's a woman named Jennifer who built a wellness business from nothing. For years, she faced coordinated opposition from established players in her industry, people with more money, more connections, more institutional power. They copied her methods, undercut her prices, poached her clients, spread lies about her credentials. Jennifer could have given up. Most people would have. The resistance was relentless, sophisticated, well-funded, but she kept going, not out of stubbornness or ego, out of a deep knowing that her work mattered, that the people she was meant to serve needed what she offered, that her path was divinely ordained even when it looked impossible. Then the great shift arrived in her reality. One of her biggest competitors, a corporate wellness chain that had been undercutting her for years, got acquired by a larger conglomerate. The new parent company conducted audits and discovered that the competitor's methods were producing poor results. They needed to fix the problem fast or face lawsuits from corporate clients. Someone in the organization remembered Jennifer's name, not from her marketing, but from a client who'd quietly sung her praises. The conglomerate reached out, not as a customer, but as a partner. They wanted to license her methods, integrate her approach into their corporate structure, pay her consulting fees that dwarfed what she'd been making independently. The competitor that tried to destroy her became the vehicle for her greatest expansion. The corporation that enabled that competitor's attacks became the source of her abundance. Reality took the very weapons aimed at her and turned them into tools for her elevation. But it gets better. That same competitor's founder, the person who'd spent years actively working against Jennifer, ended up attending one of her training sessions as part of the corporate integration. They sat in that room, learning from the woman they tried to eliminate. And nobody commented on the irony because the shift had been so complete that it seemed natural. The enemy on their knees, learning from the one they attacked. This is what the great shift looks like when it's in full effect. Now, I need you to understand something crucial about this dynamic. The great shift doesn't happen because you become more aggressive, more manipulative, or more willing to play their game. It happens because you become more yourself, more authentic, more aligned with your true frequency, more committed to your path regardless of external resistance. The Matrix and its agents attack you because you're a threat to their illusion of control, but their attacks only work if you give them what they want: your fear, your compromise, your willingness to shrink yourself to fit their boxes. When you refuse to give them that, when you hold your ground and keep being undeniably, unapologetically yourself, you create a paradox they cannot resolve. They cannot control you, but they cannot ignore you. They cannot break you, but they cannot integrate you. And in that paradox, reality itself has to shift to accommodate you, because authenticity always trumps illusion in the long game. Truth always outlasts lies. Light always penetrates darkness, given enough time. You gave it enough time. You held on long enough, and now you're seeing what happens when the universe stops testing you and starts serving you. Let me describe what this feels like internally, because the external shifts are just symptoms of something deeper happening in your consciousness. You stop caring what they think, not in an angry, rebellious way, not in a defensive, I don't need anyone way, but in a calm, centered, unshakable way. Their opinions, their judgments, their narratives about you, it all becomes background noise that doesn't touch your core. You stop checking their social media to see what they're saying about you. You stop running their criticisms through your mind, wondering if maybe they have a point. You stop trying to prove them wrong or make them understand, because you've realized something profound: their perception of you is their reality, not yours, and you no longer need to exist in their reality. This internal shift is what creates the external shift, because when you stop giving them power over your emotional state, when you stop letting their actions determine your peace, you withdraw the energy that was feeding the entire dynamic. They were attacking you because they got a reaction. They were blocking you because your frustration gave them satisfaction. They were lying about you because your defensiveness validated their narratives. But when you stop reacting, when you stop defending, when you stop caring about their version of reality, you starve the entire system of the fuel it runs on, and systems that can't feed themselves die, or in this case, they transform. They start serving the energy they can no longer consume. This is why the shift feels so inevitable, so calm, so regal. You're not fighting for victory, you're simply occupying the throne that was always yours, and reality is reorganizing itself to reflect that truth. Here's another real-world example of how this manifests. There's a man named David who worked in finance, specifically in a sector dominated by old money, old networks, old systems of gatekeeping. He wasn't born into the club. He didn't go to the right schools. He didn't have the family connections. Everything about his background screamed outsider to the establishment that controlled his industry. For a decade, David experienced every form of professional sabotage you can imagine: deals that mysteriously fell through, clients who were pressured to work with more established firms, partnerships that dissolved over fabricated concerns. Behind closed doors, the power players in his industry actively coordinated to keep him marginalized. David could have left. He could have gone to a different industry, a different city, a different path, but he loved the work itself, not the status, not the money, but the actual intellectual challenge of what he did. So he stayed. He kept delivering exceptional results for the clients who did work with him. He kept building his expertise. He kept being so good at what he did that even his enemies couldn't deny his competence. Then the 2008 financial crisis hit, and this is where the great shift revealed itself in his reality. The old guard, the establishment firms that had spent years keeping David out, got destroyed. Their strategies failed. Their networks collapsed. Their arrogance turned into desperation. And in that desperation, they needed someone who actually understood the changing landscape. Someone who hadn't been coasting on old connections and outdated models. They needed David. The same people who'd blacklisted him from their clubs were now calling him for advice. The same firms that had stolen his clients were now trying to hire him as a consultant. The same power structure that had spent a decade trying to keep him out was now begging him to save them. David didn't gloat. He didn't refuse them out of revenge. He operated from a place of such complete sovereignty that he could help them without needing their validation or approval. He consulted for some of them, charged premium rates, and used the capital to build his own firm that eventually eclipsed many of theirs. The establishment that tried to exclude him became the foundation for his empire. Their desperation became his opportunity. Their collapse became his rise, because he'd held his ground long enough for reality to reorganize itself around his frequency instead of theirs. This is the pattern you need to recognize in your own life right now. The people who blocked you are inadvertently opening doors for you. The systems that resisted you are starting to serve you. The obstacles that seemed permanent are dissolving. And if you look closely, you'll see that your former enemies are playing a role in your elevation, often without meaning to, often without even realizing it. This isn't happening because they've changed. It's happening because you've changed, or more accurately, because you've become so completely yourself that reality has no choice but to accommodate you. Let me tell you what's happening with the elites, the matrix agents, the people who coordinate to maintain control over the masses. They're experiencing something they don't have a framework to understand. They're watching people like you, people who refuse to be broken, refuse to be controlled, refuse to play by their rules, thriving in ways that shouldn't be possible according to their models. They threw everything at you. They deployed psychological warfare, social pressure, economic barriers, institutional gatekeeping. They isolated you, discredited you, tried to make you doubt your own sanity, and you survived it all. More than survived, you emerged stronger, clearer, more powerful. This terrifies them at a level they can't articulate, because their entire worldview is built on the premise that they control reality, that their systems determine outcomes, that compliance is the only path to success, and you've proven that premise false just by existing in your truth. So now they're in a double bind. They can't acknowledge your success without admitting their worldview is flawed, but they can't ignore your success because you're becoming too prominent, too influential, too undeniable. So they do the only thing left. They start serving you while telling themselves some story that protects their ego. Maybe they frame it as a strategic alliance. Maybe they call it recognizing talent. Maybe they convince themselves they were always on your side. The narrative doesn't matter. What matters is the tangible result. The people who wanted you destroyed are now contributing to your empire. This is what it looks like when the matrix breaks down and can't repair itself. This is what happens when agents realize, consciously or unconsciously, that the person they're attacking is operating under protection they can't penetrate. They don't necessarily stop being agents, but they stop being effective against you, and in their ineffectiveness, they become useful to you instead. Let me give you a fourth example, because I want you to see how this pattern transcends industries and contexts. There's a teacher named Michelle who developed an alternative education method that threatened the established academic bureaucracy. She wasn't trying to be revolutionary. She just saw that traditional approaches were failing students, and she created something that actually worked, but her success made her a target. The teachers' union went after her credentials. The school board tried to shut down her program. Other educators spread rumors that her methods were unproven, dangerous, irresponsible. Parents were pressured to remove their children from her classes. The entire institutional weight of the education system mobilized against one woman who dared to do things differently. Michelle could have quit teaching. She could have gone back to traditional methods. She could have apologized and conformed. Instead, she documented everything. She tracked her students' results with meticulous care. She let the data speak for itself, and she kept teaching the way she knew worked, regardless of the opposition. Then one of her students, a kid who'd been labeled learning disabled by the traditional system, won a national academic competition. Then another student got a full scholarship to an elite university. Then another student published research that caught the attention of educational psychologists. The results kept coming, undeniable and documented. The school board that tried to shut her down started getting questions from parents. Why wasn't this method available to more students? Why had they tried to eliminate a program that was clearly producing exceptional results? The pressure built until they had to reverse course entirely. They didn't apologize. They didn't admit they were wrong. They just quietly restructured things so that Michelle's program became the flagship model for the entire district. They gave her more resources, more freedom, more institutional support than she'd ever asked for. They promoted her to a leadership position where she could train other teachers in her methods. The bureaucracy that tried to crush her became the vehicle for spreading her influence. The administrators who wanted her gone became the people signing her budget increases. The system that resisted her innovation became the platform that amplified it. And here's the beautiful twist: those same union representatives and board members who'd fought against her now take credit for her program's success. They speak at conferences about the importance of innovative teaching methods. They've completely rewritten the history in their own minds. But the result is the same, they're serving her vision while thinking it's their own. The enemy doesn't just bow. The enemy becomes convinced that serving you was their idea all along. This is how complete the great shift becomes. Now let me tell you what this means for your immediate future. Because you're entering a phase that's going to feel almost surreal in how smoothly things flow. Opportunities are going to appear with perfect timing, not because you're hustling harder or networking more effectively, but because reality is organizing itself to present you with exactly what you need when you need it. You'll think about something you want to create or experience, and within days or weeks, the exact resources or connections required will manifest. People are going to seek you out, not people you have to convince or persuade, but people who already resonate with your frequency. They'll appear in your life like they were sent, because in a very real sense, they were. Reality is matching you with aligned collaborators, supporters, and allies who will accelerate your path rather than slow it down. Resources will flow to you from unexpected places. Money, knowledge, tools, access. Everything you need to build what you must do will come to you through channels you could never have imagined. The abundance you once struggled to attain will now feel as natural and inevitable as water flowing downhill. Your old obstacles will become your supporters, not because they've changed their minds, but because serving your rise now benefits them more than opposing you. They'll help you by inventing a story that protects their ego, but they'll still help you. This is your new normal. This is what life looks like on the other side of the great change. However, I must warn you about one thing, because it will be very tempting and could undermine everything you've built. When your enemies begin to bow to you, when the system begins to serve you, when the people who attacked you begin to treat you like royalty, you will feel the urge to be arrogant. You will want to say, "I told you so." You will want to remind them of every little insult, every attack, every moment they approached you with suspicion. Don't do that. If you understand what you need to do, write "I understand" in the comments now. That energy would pull you back down to their level. That need for validation from them would give them power over you again. True sovereignty doesn't require witnesses. True power doesn't need acknowledgement from those who opposed it. When they bow, you simply nod and keep walking. When they serve you, you accept the service without commentary. When they ask how you did it, you smile and say nothing of substance, because your victory speaks for itself. Your throne doesn't need their validation. Your empire doesn't require their approval. You are the king walking through your castle where everyone bows. You don't stop to remind each person that they once opposed you. You don't need their apologies or their explanations. You simply move through your domain with the calm certainty of someone who knows they belong there. This is the energy of post-shift sovereignty. This is how you maintain the new reality that's organizing itself around you. Let me tell you about one more example, because this one illustrates how deep the great shift can go when you fully embody it. There's a woman named Angela who spent 15 years in an abusive family system. Not physically abusive, but psychologically sophisticated in their manipulation. They gaslit her about her own experiences. They sabotaged her relationships. They drained her financially while calling it helping family. They spread narratives about her mental health to justify their control. Angela tried everything. She tried to make them understand. She tried to set boundaries they would respect. She tried to earn their approval by being the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, the perfect family member. Nothing worked. The more she gave, the more they demanded. The more she achieved, the more they undermined. Finally, she did the one thing that terrified her most. She walked away, cut contact, stopped explaining herself, stopped defending herself, stopped participating in their reality entirely. And for a year, maybe two, it looked like she'd lost everything. No family holidays, no support system, just her and her truth. Alone. But she held that ground. She built a life that reflected her actual values, not their projections. She surrounded herself with people who could love her without needing to control her. She created success on her own terms, and then the great shift arrived. Her family's dysfunction, no longer buffered by her problem-solving abilities, started collapsing in on itself. The golden child who'd been favored over Angela revealed themselves to be incompetent without someone to blame. The parent who'd orchestrated much of the abuse lost their health and their support network. The siblings who'd participated in the gaslighting found themselves in crisis with nobody to help. And where did they turn? To Angela, the one they'd abused, the one they'd discarded, the one they'd told everyone was crazy, unstable, ungrateful. They came to her with apologies that were really manipulations, with regrets that were really requests for help. with acknowledgments that were really attempts to pull her back into the system. And Angela, from her place of complete sovereignty, made a choice that confused them entirely. She helped them, not by returning to the family system, not by accepting their apologies as truth, but by offering them the same boundaries and dignity she'd offer any human being in crisis. She sent resources, she made introductions to professionals who could help. She did what was within her power without sacrificing herself. And in doing so, she demonstrated something profound, that her freedom from their system didn't require their destruction, that her sovereignty was so complete she could be generous without being controlled, that she'd transcended the need for revenge because she'd already won the only victory that mattered, freedom to be herself. The family that tried to break her became dependent on her strength. The system that tried to control her had to accept her terms to access her help. The people who told everyone she was the problem now tell everyone she's the solution, not because they've genuinely changed, but because reality has reorganized itself around her frequency so completely that they have no choice but to acknowledge it. This is the ultimate expression of the Great Shift, when you can help your enemies from a place of sovereignty rather than subjugation, when their survival becomes dependent on your goodwill. When the very people who tried to destroy you end up serving your purpose just by trying to save themselves. You're not playing their game anymore. You're playing a completely different game, on a completely different level, and they're forced to play by your rules if they want to survive in your reality. Now, let me tell you what distinguishes someone who's genuinely in the Great Shift from someone who's just experiencing a temporary win or a stroke of luck. Because there are pretenders who will read these words and try to fake this energy, try to perform sovereignty without having earned it. The difference is internal peace. Someone who's truly shifted doesn't need to announce it. They don't need to post about their enemy's downfall. They don't need to celebrate publicly every time an obstacle moves aside. They move through these victories with the calm certainty of someone who knows this is how reality is supposed to work. When the pretenders get a win, they're shocked, they're excited, they're posting screenshots and writing manifestos about how they proved everyone wrong. When someone who's truly shifted gets a win, they simply nod and prepare for the next phase, because they're not surprised that reality is serving them. They expect it. It's the new normal. The pretenders are still seeking validation from the external world. The shifted are validating themselves through their alignment with their own truth. The pretenders need witnesses. The shifted are content to rule in silence if that's what's required. This distinction matters because the Great Shift isn't a destination you arrive at and then coast. It's a frequency you maintain through continued authenticity, continued alignment, continued refusal to compromise your core truth. If you slip back into people-pleasing, into performing for approval, into bending yourself to fit their expectations, the shift reverses. Not completely, not immediately, but gradually. Reality stops organizing itself around you and starts testing you again. But if you maintain your frequency, if you continue to operate from that place of unshakable authenticity, the shift deepens, the doors open wider, the flow becomes smoother, the former enemies become more useful, the system serves you with increasing efficiency. This is why I describe it with regal imagery. A king doesn't question whether the servants will bow. A queen doesn't wonder whether the court will show respect. They walk into the room knowing their position, knowing their authority, knowing that reality will reflect their sovereignty back to them, and that knowing creates the reality. You've earned that knowing. You've paid the price through years of holding your ground against forces that should have broken you. You've maintained your frequency through attacks that would have corrupted most people. You've refused to bend even when bending would have been easier, more comfortable, more accepted. Now you get to collect what's owed to you, not as a reward, but as a natural consequence, not as luck, but as law. The universe reorganizing itself around someone who proved they can't be controlled, can't be corrupted, can't be integrated into systems of illusion and manipulation. Let me tell you what's happening with the people who attacked you. Right now, in this moment, some of them are experiencing cognitive dissonance that's literally making them sick. They're watching you rise while they stagnate or fall. They're seeing opportunities flow to you while theirs dry up. They're witnessing the very outcomes they tried to prevent, happening anyway, happening despite everything they did. And they can't make sense of it. Their worldview doesn't accommodate for someone succeeding outside their approved pathways. Their belief system doesn't allow for reality to favor someone they've judged as unworthy. So they're experiencing a form of psychological break where their observations contradict their convictions so severely that they can't reconcile the two. Some of them will come to you with apologies. Some will pretend they were always supportive. Some will try to attach themselves to your success. And you need to be very clear about how you handle these approaches. Not everyone who bows deserves to stay in your kingdom. Not everyone who apologizes has genuinely changed. Not everyone who wants to serve you now is worthy of your trust. You get to be discerning. You get to be selective. You get to maintain the high standards that got you here in the first place. The Great Shift gives you options you didn't have before. It doesn't obligate you to accept everyone who suddenly wants access to you. You're the king in the castle. You decide who sits at your table. You determine who gets to participate in what you're building. And that selectivity isn't cruelty, it's wisdom. Because some of those people bowing are genuinely transformed by witnessing your journey. They've learned something about authenticity, about integrity, about the long game that success requires. Those people can become valuable allies if you choose to give them a second chance. But others are just opportunists. They're bowing because you have power now, not because they respect how you earned it. They're serving you because it benefits them, not because they've had any genuine shift in consciousness. Those people will betray you again the moment it serves their interests. Your discernment is one of the gifts the Great Shift brings. You can see clearly now who's genuine and who's performing. You can feel the difference between authentic alignment and strategic positioning. Trust that discernment. Honor that knowing. Let it guide who you allow into your inner circle now that you have the power to choose. Here's what I want you to understand about the timing of all this. The Great Shift doesn't happen randomly. It happens when you've completed a specific initiatory process that most people never finish because the pressure breaks them first. You had to experience real attack to know the difference between genuine threat and manufactured fear. You had to face actual opposition to develop the strength required to hold your ground under pressure. You had to endure isolation to discover that your worth isn't determined by popular opinion. You had to survive betrayal to learn who you really are when everyone else falls away. Each phase of what you've been through was preparing you for this moment. Every attack was training. Every obstacle was testing whether you meant it when you claimed your sovereignty. Every betrayal was purging people from your life who would have sabotaged this phase if they'd stayed. You passed the initiation. Most people don't. Most people crack under less pressure than you endured. Most people compromise their truth for less comfort than you refused. Most people sell themselves out for less security than you rejected. That's why the Great Shift is happening for you specifically. That's why reality is reorganizing itself around your frequency. Because you proved you're worthy of this level of power by demonstrating you won't abuse it, won't corrupt it, won't sell it for temporary gain. The universe only gives kingdoms to people who've proven they can handle the responsibility. You've proven it. Now you're collecting what you earned. Let me tell you what the next phase looks like, because understanding the trajectory helps you navigate it with wisdom. Right now, you're in the early stage of the Great Shift where the most obvious changes are happening. Enemies are bowing. Obstacles are moving. Opportunities are appearing. This phase is exciting because it's so visible, so validating after years of being attacked and blocked. But there's a deeper phase coming. A phase where the shifts become more subtle but more profound. Where reality starts organizing itself around you in ways you don't consciously notice. Until you look back and realize everything aligned perfectly without you having to force anything. In this deeper phase, you'll stop thinking about your former enemies entirely. Not because you're trying to forgive them or let go, but because they'll become genuinely irrelevant to your reality. They'll still exist. They might even still talk about you, but their opinions will have zero energetic impact on your field. You'll stop checking if obstacles are going to appear because you'll internalize that your path is clear. You'll stop wondering if opportunities will manifest because you'll know they're inevitable. You'll stop questioning whether you deserve this because you'll be so anchored in your worth that external validation becomes unnecessary. This is the phase where sovereignty becomes your default state rather than something you have to consciously maintain, where power flows through you effortlessly because you're no longer blocking it with doubt, fear, or the need to prove anything. And in this phase, the most profound shifts happen, because reality doesn't just reorganize itself around people who are trying to be powerful. It reorganizes itself around people who become so comfortable in their power that they forget they're wielding it. You'll make decisions from pure intuition and watch them work out perfectly. You'll follow impulses that make no logical sense and discover they led you exactly where you needed to go. You'll trust yourself so completely that external circumstances lose their ability to shake you. This is where you're headed. This is the fullness of the Great Shift, not just enemies bowing, but a reality so aligned with your frequency that conflict stops arising in the first place. Not just obstacles moving aside, but a path so clear you forget there were ever obstacles to begin with. But to get there, you have to navigate this current phase with wisdom. You have to resist the temptation to abuse your new power. You have to stay humble even as people elevate you. You have to remember that this shift happened because of who you are, not because of what you achieved. The moment you start performing sovereignty instead of embodying it, the frequency slips and the shift begins to reverse. Stay authentic, stay grounded, stay committed to your truth even when the pressure to perform increases now that you have an audience. Because the people watching you rise are going to project all kinds of expectations onto you. They're going to want you to be their savior, their guru, their example, their weapon against their own enemies. Don't take on those projections. Don't become what they want you to be. Keep being exactly who you are, the same person who held their ground when nobody was watching, who stayed true when everyone was attacking, who maintained integrity when compromise would have been easier. That person is who earned the great shift. That person is who reality is serving. Stay that person, and the shift deepens infinitely. Become a performance of that person, and the shift starts to fade. The war is over. You won, not by defeating them, but by refusing to be defeated. Not by destroying their system, but by transcending it entirely. Not by playing their game better, but by revealing that their game was always an illusion that only had power over people who believed in it. You stopped believing. You stepped into your own authority. You claimed your own kingdom, and now reality has no choice but to reflect that truth back to you in increasingly undeniable ways. The system serves you now. The elites are on their knees whether they realize it or not. The obstacles move aside before you arrive. The enemies inadvertently assist your rise. And you walk through it all with the calm certainty of someone who knows this is exactly how it was always meant to be. This is your inheritance. This is your birthright. This is what happens when a chosen one completes the journey and steps into their full sovereignty. The kingdom was always yours. You were just being tested to see if you'd claim it. You claimed it. Now rule with the wisdom that got you here. Help those who genuinely seek help. Ignore those who just want to feed off your energy. Build the world you were meant to create. And watch as reality continues to reorganize itself around your vision with increasing precision and power. The great shift has arrived in your life, and it's only just beginning. Walk like the king you are. Every room is your castle now. Every person who once stood against you is learning what it means to serve someone they can't control. Every system that tried to break you is discovering what happens when you refuse to break. This is your time. This is your rise. This is your reign. The throne has always been yours. Now sit on your throne without apology and watch as the entire universe bows to accept the truth you have always known. Listening to the voice within you, you were chosen for this. You were created for this. You were destined for this. And nothing they did could stop it. Nothing they said could prevent it. Nothing they tried could derail it. Because the great change does not happen to you when you are so authentically yourself that reality has no choice but to realign itself around your frequency. This change happens through you. You are now that person. Own it. Make it real. Rule over it. The battle is over, and you won. In honor of your victory, share this with all your awakened friends and family. Send them this video, and click on the video on the screen to continue the flow. It's in your hands.